Okay. So the board chairman ensures that the board meets regularly. He also ascertains the views of the board and the decisions reached by the board. He also ensures that individual directors contribute to board discussions. You know, he ensures that, contribute to board discussions. He's also responsible for the provision of information to directors. He also ensures that any NED or non-executive director who is not contributing to board discussions is not re-elected or is asked to resign or is removed. And he also ensures that the board has a process for assessing the effectiveness of board performance as a whole. So these are some of the functions of a board chairman. Now let's compare CEO and chairman, right? Yes, so it will help you. The CEO is the executive director. He's a full-time employee. The chairman could be part-time or full-time. In practice, what I've seen is that they are part-time and they may be independent. The reporting lines, in terms of reporting lines, all executive managers report directly or indirectly to the CEO. The CEO then reports to the chairman and to the board generally. The chairman reports to the company's shareholders. So the chairman is supposed to have the interest of the shareholders at heart as the leader of the board. Now, what are the main responsibilities? The CEO is the head of the executive management team to draft proposed plans, budgets, and strategies for board approval. So that's the duty of the CEO. And to implement decisions of the board. So the CEO implements the decision of the board. What are the main responsibilities of the chairman? The chairman is the leader of the board. He makes sure that the board fulfills its role successfully. And he ensures that all the members of the board or all the directors contribute to the work of the board. So this is a simple snapshot of the differences between the two. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this sounds like a repetition of concept, but it's necessary because corporate governance is necessary when it comes to strategy. So forgive if we have to, talk about these concepts over and over. Okay, now the role of NEDs. The appointment of non-executive directors should be a matter for the board as a whole. Non-executive directors are expected to use their specialist knowledge and experience to contribute to the deliberations and decision-making of the board of directors. They may be classified as independent or not independent, although they should all have independence of judgment. So the NED should have, they should also possess the knowledge and experience to contribute to, discussions on the board or to bring an independent judgment to bear on the issues of strategy. NED should provide independent viewpoints and assistance to executive directors. Individuals should not accept an appointment as NED if they cannot provide the time. We've already talked about these things. Now let's talk about the broad roles of NEDs. Number one is strategy or strategy, depending on where you're coming from. a document that was published in the UK in 2003. So you can clearly see that Ghana borrows a lot of concepts from the UK. Ghana borrows a lot of concepts from the UK. Ghana seems to borrow a lot of concepts from the UK. So number one is strategy. NED should challenge, they should be able to challenge constructively and help to develop proposals on strategy. That's what they are there for on the board. That's what they are there for on the board. They shouldn't just be sitting on the board for sitting there sick. They should challenge. They should challenge what's going on. They should challenge. It's very, very key. They should challenge. So, another thing is performance. Performance. When we talk about performance, what exactly do we mean? NED should monitor the performance of NED should monitor the performance of executive management in meeting their agreed targets and goals. Number 3 is risk. NED should satisfy themselves about the integrity of the financial information produced by the company. So they should look into issues like that. What is the integrity? What is the integrity of a financial statement? What is the integrity of the financial statement? Very, very important. It's very, very important. Then number 4 is people. NED should be responsible for deciding the remuneration of executive directors. Of course, this makes sense. And other senior managers and should have a major role in the appointment of new directors. Of course, this makes sense, right? Because if executive directors were to decide on their own remuneration, it won't be easy for the company. It won't be easy for the company. They will pay themselves hefty salaries. They'll pay themselves very, very hefty salaries. Very, very hefty salaries. So that is something that has to be. Those are the roles of the NEDs. Any questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let's move on to the next. Still on independent NEDs. Still on independent NEDs. A lot of the concepts here are kind of like repetitive, but it's necessary to understand these concepts and go through over and over again. So NEDs are either independent or dependent. The code of best practices states that an NED would be considered independent if he or she is not a substantial shareholder in the company. That's one. If it's not a substantial shareholder in the company, you'll be considered independent. Has not been employed by the company in any executive capacity for the preceding 3 years. It's not a member of the immediate family of an individual who has been employed in an executive capacity. It's not a professional advisor or consultant to the company. It's not a major significant supplier, customer, has no contractual relationship with the company. That's when we'll call that person independent, or the non-executive director independent. It's very, very crucial. It's very, very crucial. So, and a non-executive director, when we say a non-executive director is independent, it means that that person is not a substantial shareholder in the company and has not been employed by the company in any executive capacity. You know, we earlier mentioned that once a person is an executive director, that person, it's impossible for that person to be independent. You know, so for an NED to be independent, it should, not have been employed in any executive capacity, as well as other things that we've talked about in our discussion. Very, very important. Induction and training of directors. Induction and training of directors. The corporate governance codes and supporting guidance in some countries deal extensively with induction and training of directors. Let's look at what Ghana is doing. The Ghana Code of Best Practices in Corporate Governance mentions the requirement for the chairman to establish performance reviews. But again, in Ghana, the code does not go into detail. Like we saw earlier, when it came to the separation of duties between the chairman and the CEO. Again, the code does not go into detail. The code makes the following statements about induction of new directors and ongoing training for all directors. New directors should be formally oriented. And they have to be informed about the company's business, their competitive positions, their strategy. They should be given a strategic overview of the company. Directors should be informed about laws, regulations, and rules that are relevant to the company's operations and to their responsibilities and obligations as directors. Directors should be given ongoing training, not only in their particular field of expertise, but in also other areas that would enhance their discharge of duties. So when it comes to training, what are we talking about? They should have to be formally oriented. So you are giving them the broad picture. What's the strategic picture? What's the competitive position of the company? They should also be informed about the laws and regulations that are relevant to the industry which the company operates, number 2. Number 3, they should be provided ongoing training. That is even outside their field, not just in their field, but outside their field to assist them in their duties. 3 levels of training. Criticisms of NEDs. Criticisms of NEDs. NEDs are often criticized for failing to perform effectively in their role. Failing to perform effectively in their role. NEDs are often criticized. They are often criticized. There are 3 main criticisms, right? There are 3 main criticisms. Lack of knowledge about the company and the industry or markets it operates in, that's an issue. Sometimes the NED, they are experienced, but in terms of the relevant knowledge when it comes to that company and that industry, sometimes they don't seem to have it. The chairman is responsible. So someone might be asking, but if you know that the person doesn't have the knowledge, why do you bring them on? The chairman is responsible for ensuring that all directors are properly informed, but this is an ideal situation that does not always exist in practice. Yeah, but sometimes it does happen where NEDs did not have in-depth knowledge about the market. So for example, you can go and bring an NED from Canada to come and be an NED for, let's say, Sinapiaba in Ghana, right? The Ghanaian market, he might be experienced, but the Ghanaian market, you might not necessarily understand it. Another thing is insufficient time with the company. Some of them, they don't have time. They're just going up and down, up and down. Some of them too koto, and they accept the views of executive directors. And the reason is they feel like the executives know more about the company's operations. Know more about the company's operations. Now let's talk a bit about board meetings. Decisions are taken by a board at board meetings. Therefore, follows that in order to fulfill its role effectively, the board should meet. It's not very often, fairly often. Sorry. This one there, Agba in the slide. The board should meet fairly often, not very often. Typically, a board may have regular meetings, and the chairman may call additional meetings when matters arise. So what does the code of best practice recommend? The board should meet regularly, in the case of listed companies, at least 6 times a year. So once every 2 months, it's okay. Commitments of the board should meet as frequently, committees of the board should meet as frequently as necessary to fulfill their functions. Attendance by directors, especially NEDs at board meetings and meetings of committees, should be a key element in their continued service on the board. So if you have a board meeting, it's like just if you're a member of a club or a group or whatever it is, right? You need your membership there. If you are not showing up, they might take you out of the board. So the code has given us some guidelines in terms of that. The nature of a board committee. A board committee is a committee set up by the board consisting of selected directors, which is given responsibility for a particular aspect of the company's affairs. Anytime you hear a committee, like the way they have parliamentary committees, parliamentary committees, it means that they are involved or they are given responsibility for a particular aspect of the company's affairs for which the board has reserved the power of decision-making. A committee is not given decision-making powers. So what are they given? Remember the twin roles we talked about, right? The twin roles, decision-making and monitoring. The committee is given monitoring powers. Its role is to monitor an aspect of the company's affairs and report back to the board and make recommendations to the board. They are not given decision-making powers. The full board of directors should make a decision based on the committee's recommendations. When the full board rejects a recommendation for a committee, there should be a good reason for doing so. A board committee will meet with sufficient frequency to enable it to carry out its responsibilities. It is important to remember, however, that a board committee is not a substitute for executive management, and a board committee does not have executive powers. So what are we saying here? When we are looking at the twin roles, decision-making and monitoring, the board does not have decision-making powers. Please know that. It is just a committee. So I remember when they were broadcasting the PAC thing, right? The PAC or the committee, I can't remember the details, but they take that information and go and present to a higher authority. So the committee does not make decisions. It monitors an aspect of the company's affairs and reports back to the board. The committee has a boss. They report back, and the boss is their board. They report back to the board and make recommendations. It's up to the board to take it or leave it. Within a system of corporate governance, a company might have several committees. The code of best practice states that the board should establish committees as it deems appropriate. Now, a board committee may also include individuals who are not directors, provided that the responsibility for any decisions by the committee, not any decision, I'll say any recommendations by the committee should rest entirely with the board members on the committee. Any questions on this? Okay. I think my people don't have any questions. They understand everything. They are sharks. They are sharp brain. Okay. The main board committees. The code of best practice identifies just 2 board committees that a listed company should have. These are a remuneration committee. So this is what the code of best practice is, saying. There should be a remuneration committee. Remuneration there is about salaries, compensation, which responsibility is to consider the remuneration of company executives, including executive directors, as well as other senior managers. So they determine how much these people will pay. And you also have an audit committee, whose responsibilities include monitoring financial reporting and auditing within the company. So for those studying audits, you see how strategy and audit is all fitting in together. So this is where the audit committee comes. You'll be hearing audit committee, audit committee, audit committee. That's why they are here. The code is recommending them, or that's why they are here. Codes of corporate governance and best practice guidance in other countries may also call for what we call, in other countries, they also call for nominations committee. Nominations committee. And these people are more like, their responsibility is to identify and recommend individuals for appointment to the board of directors. And there's also risk management committee. Risk management committee. And these people, in situations where the risk management responsibilities has not been discharged to the audit committee, they handle risk management issues specifically. Sometimes the audit committee will handle risk management issues because risk management is, tied to internal controls and tied to audits. But sometimes if it's separated, the risk management committee will take care of risk management issues specifically. There are 2 reasons for having board committees. There are 2 reasons. The board can use a committee to delegate time-consuming and detailed work to some of the board members. The board can also delegate a committee aspects of its work where there's an actual or possible conflict of interest between executive directors and the interests of the company. So it's a way of engaging some of your people, some of the members of the board. Can create committees, can use it to delegate time-consuming work. However, to avoid conflict of interest, board committees should consist wholly or largely of NEDs. And arguably independent NEDs. You do not want people who are not independent. Let's see how many slides we have left. Hey. Come on, I have 41 slides. Okay. Let me see. Well, today is 3rd, 10th. Okay, we are on track. We're on track. Renumeration, senior executives and non-executive directors. In some countries, for example, the USA, it is common for most senior executives to be excluded from the board of directors. But that's the US. I wouldn't want to concentrate too much on the US. So how are NEDs compensated? NEDs are paid an annual fee for their services. This is usually a fixed amount based on the estimated number of days that the director will spend with the company during the year. For example, attending board meetings and meetings of board committees. The Code of Best Practices states that the board as a whole should decide the remuneration of NEDs. And obviously, when it comes to discussions on the remuneration of individual NEDs, the individual concerned should exclude themselves from the board deliberations. You cannot be discussing your own salary. Why is executive remuneration a governance issue? Why do you think it's a governance issue? The remuneration of executive directors and other senior executives can be a serious issue for good corporate governance, especially when executives can influence or decide what their remuneration should be. Like I've already indicated, when individuals can decide their own remuneration, then there's that temptation to make their remuneration package huge. You know, who doesn't like money? If I'm deciding my own pay now, you know, I'll probably pay myself, not probably, I'll even pay myself more than what the CEO of Microsoft, what's his name? I forgot. The CEO of Microsoft earns. Similarly, when executive directors can decide the general level of remuneration for executive managers, there's a strong possibility that they will decide collectively to set remuneration at high level. So there's that temptation, you know, and that's why it's a governance issue. You know, it is true that senior executives should be well paid, but these senior executives might take these large remuneration packages and not perform very well. And this will be against the interests of the shareholders. So this is a whole governance issue, right? It's a governance issue because if I decide my own salary, there's a temptation to make it as large as possible. Components of a remuneration package. A remuneration package for an executive director or senior executive is a part of their contract of service. Their remuneration is reviewed regularly. Typically, every year is reviewed. So what are the components? We discussed this in the previous session. It's when I threw in, what's the CEO of Microsoft's name? Huh. Come on, I've forgotten. Satya Nadella. The components of a remuneration package, when we looked at Satya Nadella's compensation, we saw that, where am I? It was composed of 1, a basic salary, 2, 1 or more annual cash bonuses, and 3, stock options or share options. So that's the components of a remuneration package. A director may also receive additional benefits such as free medical insurance, company car, use of company aeroplane, helicopter. Those are, you know, add-ons. The purpose of a remuneration package. What is the purpose of a remuneration package? A remuneration package should attract individuals to a company and persuade them to work for the company. The size of the remuneration package that is needed to attract top quality individuals depends largely on conditions in the labor market. So the purpose of the remuneration package is to incentivize. Ghana's code, and this is why I want us to take note of, Ghana's code of best practice makes 3 statements about remuneration policy. Number 1, levels of remuneration should be competitive. Number 2, there should be a system for short-term and long-term remuneration. And number 3, stock options, employee share ownership schemes, or other equity-oriented schemes should be considered as a way of linking the interest of managers to shareholders. Same thoughts or similar thoughts. Okay. Now let's look at the role of the remuneration committee. The role of the remuneration committee. The code of best practices states that the majority of remuneration committee members should be non-executive directors. So what are their functions? The committee should establish a formal and transparent procedure for developing policy. So they develop policy on executive remuneration. They also put in place a proper system of long-term and short-term compensation to incentivize management. They also scrutinize service contracts of executives. We've talked about basic salary. We've talked about cash bonuses. And we've talked about, so when we say short-term and long-term angles to remuneration, the short-term ones are things like bonuses. So we do well this year, you get your bonus. But the long-term ones are share options, stock options, where the director is given, the right to, to buy stocks in the company. These are stock options. So in case you've forgotten what a share option is, let me repeat again, or a stock option is, let me repeat again. In Ghana, do we say stock or share? Please, someone remind me. It's share. It's shares, right? In other parts, we say stock. So, okay. Say share, okay. So if I say stock, it's used in, I think it's a more American term. Yeah, so a share option gives its holder the right at a future date to buy shares in the company at a fixed price. So that's a long-term incentive. It's a long-term incentive. A short-term incentive is more of a bonus. It's more of a bonus. Very, very important. So the remuneration committee should think of both short-term and long-term incentives. Then there's also what we call fully paid shares. Fully paid shares. It's an alternative to share options. An alternative to share option is the award of fully paid shares in the company. This avoids much of the problem of a fall in the share price. In the case of share options, the exercise, whereas share options with an exercise price below the market price have no value at all, fully paid shares retain some value even when the share price falls. Yes, so fully paid shares is quite different from stock options in that regard, because when the price falls, you still retain some value. So it's like basically the directors in this case pay a set amount for those shares. So the difference here is that the fully paid shares avoid the problem of a fall in the share price. That's the main difference. That's the main difference in it. So some companies do that. Some companies do go for the share options or the stock options. Okay, so I think we would bring it to an end here. Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about, but we'll bring it to an end here. Any questions for me? So far, this is a 40 document slide. Any questions for me? Questions, tips on the exam. Let's talk about the exam. Usually 30 days to the exam. We have ongoing conversations. Any tips, struggles? What have you?
Sir, please, I have a question.
Okay.
When you started, you said the IT governance.
Yes.
You mentioned IT system, IT operation, IT processes, and I think one other I've forgotten. What is the difference between these four?
Oh, IT. Is the one I was talking about? IT. I can't remember what you were saying. Is it this? Let me see if I can go back. Is it IT systems, IT
Operations.
IT operations? Oh, they are all related concepts, like IT software. They are all very related concepts. It's not like they are
Different.
yeah, they are all related concepts. They are all very, very related concepts. Yeah, so yeah, they are different in their own right, but they are very related. It's all under the umbrella of IT, right? It's like you are talking about a computer, you talk about a mouse, you talk about a CPU, you talk about the desktop and all that. Yeah, but it's not something where you have to go and chew the definition.
Okay.
I was just making a point, that's all. When I was talking about IT procedures,